If you've ever opened a research article and immediately felt overwhelmed by the methods section, you're not alone. This is the part where the jargon gets heavy. Randomized trials, sampling techniques, and regression models. And for a lot of educators, this is where the article starts to lose them. But here's the good news. You don't need to be a statistician to make sense of the methods section. You just need to know what to look for. Hi friends, I'm Matthew Courtney, and I help educators use research to make smart, confident decisions. So if you're into that, make sure you like and subscribe and come be a part of our community. Today, we're going to break down the methods section of a research article so that you can understand how the study was done and decide whether you can trust its findings. Let's start with the big picture. The methods section tells you how the researchers tried to answer their question. It's about design, participants, procedures, and the tools they used. This section is all about transparency, so that someone else could replicate the study if they wanted to. You don't have to understand every technical term, but you do want to be able to answer three key questions. Who was studied? What was done? And how was it measured? So let's break these three questions down. First, who was studied? This is often called the sample or participant section. Look for how many people were in the study. Were they students, teachers, maybe schools or districts? What were the demographics, the grade levels, and all the other relevant traits? Then ask yourself, are these participants similar to the ones in my context? Would the same strategy or finding likely apply to my students or staff? The more aligned the sample is with your setting, the more confidence you can have in using the results. Second, what was done? This is where the study design comes in. There are a few key designs to be aware of. The randomized control trial gives us the strongest evidence. This is where participants are randomly sorted into groups. In a quasi-experimental design, groups weren't randomly assigned, but there's still a comparison between two groups. In a descriptive study, the researcher is simply observing what is, without really making comparisons. And in a qualitative study, the researcher is using interviews, focus groups, and observations to help understand the impact of a phenomenon. Eventually, you'll want to get these terms and definitions in your head, but for now, here's a shortcut. The more a study compares two groups or tests an intervention, the more likely it is to show a cause and effect. The more it describes or explores a situation, the better it is for generating ideas and understanding the nuances. Also, check for how long the study lasted and how the researchers tried to control for other factors. A one-week study with no comparison groups is going to be less reliable than a semester-long study with a control group. Third, how was it measured? This part tells you what tools or instruments were used to gather the data. Were the researchers using standardized tests, surveys or questionnaires, interviews or classroom observations, maybe digital learning platforms or behavior tracking tools? You want to know whether these tools were valid and reliable. Do they actually measure what the study is trying to investigate? Sometimes researchers will name specific instruments, like a well-known reading fluency assessment or a validated engagement survey. Other times, they'll describe tools that they created themselves. Look for whether they explain how the tools were used and why they chose them. If a study uses vague or unclear measures, that weakens the strength of the evidence. Now, here's the most important part. Don't get lost in the weeds. You don't need to understand all of the jargon. You just need to decide if the study was conducted in a thoughtful and trustworthy way. Here's a few red flags to watch for. Very small sample sizes with big claims. No clear description of participants or procedures. No mention of how outcomes were measured. Vague or overly complicated language without an explanation. And now, here's a few green flags. Clear explanations of who was studied and how they were selected. A defined study design that matches the research question. Valid, transparent tools for measuring outcomes. Honest discussions of limitations and challenges. To sum it all up, the method section answers how the study was done. You want to know who was in it, what happened, how it was measured, and whether the approach makes sense for the question being asked. Remember, you don't need to be an expert. You just need to read with curiosity and caution. If this video helped you to feel more confident in navigating the method section, go ahead and like and subscribe. And don't miss the next video, where we'll talk about how to interpret the results without needing a statistics degree. I'll see you next time.